Hello everybody and welcome to a new interview in our today's Campus Innovation interview series. My name is Kirsten Winkler, I'm the Innovation Editor. Today I'm very happy to be joined by Matthew Pittinsky. He's an education entrepreneur and currently CEO of Parchment. Matthew, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So I said currently because, well, if we look back for your very young age, you have had quite a few milestones, I think, achieved in your career. Of course, we should say that you are one of the two co-founders of Blackboard, stayed with the company for 11 years, I think, from 97 to 2008. Went then on to do your PhD in sociology, if I'm not mistaken, at the University of Arizona, or at least you were an associate professor in...
Yeah, so my PhD was at Columbia. It was a joint program between Teachers College and the Department of Sociology. And then I came to Arizona to serve as a tenure-track faculty member at Arizona State University. And that brings me here.
All right. And then you became more involved with Parchment, although we have to say that it's not a completely new idea. But let me ask you to sort of start off and give the audience an impression what you are interested in and what excites you, of course, so much about what you are doing right now. Yeah, what was it like coming from college, and then what was the idea that fascinated you and led to founding Blackboard with your co-founder, to then saying, I want to concentrate on the research side, but throwing yourself into the entrepreneurial aspect of education again, and then saying, okay, let's do Parchment?
Sure. Well, I come from a family of educators. So my mom was a teacher, my dad was a school board president and a university administrator, and I'm the youngest of four. One of my brothers is a faculty member, and the other one has worked, or one of the other ones has worked in education technology too. So I would say education is in my blood, and that's definitely the common denominator. And generally speaking, what links all of my experiences together is that I have continued to fail to be a teacher. So what I set out to do as an undergraduate was to be a social studies teacher, and I went through the certification program. But I thought I could wait a little while and maybe impact education differently. And so Blackboard was inspired by a very simple problem, which is, how do you allow teachers to create a class website of some impact when they don't know HTML? They shouldn't have to be programmers. And so in 1997, it seemed obvious that someone would need to make it obscenely easy for individual teachers to create class websites at whatever pace they were comfortable, maybe just posting PowerPoints, doing an online exam, using the discussion board. So I don't think it'd be fair to say we were trying to transform pedagogy or think about the future of education online. It was a much more practical problem, but of course that's how things developed over time, is the flipped classroom and new ways of conceiving traditional classroom time, all the way obviously to now with MOOCs, the massive expansion of access to high quality online education. So that was the basic idea of Blackboard, and it developed, as you mentioned. I was there for 11 years. I left in 2008, and so then again I was going to finally become a teacher, but this time at the university level, and studied sociology because that's just the discipline I've always been interested in. And I really think what makes schools special and universities special is the social dynamics of the classroom, of the way faculty are organized and govern the university. But Parchment sort of pulled me in after 2 years on the faculty. And again, there's a simple problem, which is, in a world where your skills and training matter so much, where credentials embody what you know and how well you know it, it just seemed crazy that, generally speaking, people would fax a request to get a transcript or other credential, they would write a check. It would be printed and mailed in an envelope, inside another envelope, inside another envelope. And generally, such useful information was trapped. And it wasn't easy for an individual learner or for institutions to take transcripts and other types of credentials, move them into the electronic age, and therefore make them a lot more useful. So I think, the overlying connection is just my own interest in education and trying to solve practical problems.
And what you just described, was it the state of credentials just like a few years back until now? Is it still, although of course Parchment is quite flourishing, we can say, but is it still the state of affairs in many high schools and colleges or universities in the country? And what is, of course, sort of the product, the service? How do you transform this whole process with Parchment?
Well, it's a great question, especially kind of where are we in the evolution of moving to electronic. So I would say it still is the case. And remember, you have to step back. In our life course, we earn 3 basic types of credentials. We earn academic credentials, so degrees, certificates, transcripts, and obviously the nature of academic credentials is going through a lot of change, which is kind of exciting. You have professional credentials, so I'm a certified Toyota mechanic or Java engineer. And then you even have personal credentials like infant CPR, or to be a scuba certified, or to be a hockey coach. Actually, you have to be certified. And so if you think about credentials over the life course and how important they are to different transitions and opportunities in that life course, we are still very early on. Now, academic credentials and transcripts in particular are the most developed. They're the ones that are sent, by high school students to colleges, and college students to transfer or go to grad school, or Ernst & Young collects transcripts, Goldman Sachs collects transcripts. To be a nurse, you provide a transcript. To be a cosmetologist, you provide transcripts. So transcripts seem like the logical place to start, because of all of those different types of credentials, they're the most commonly exchanged. And, to your point, they are still very much paper-based. So we have 25% of the high schools in the country who are now set up to receive electronic requests and send transcripts electronically. So that's amazing, like 25% of secondary schools doing anything. But there's another way of saying that, which is 75% of high schools don't use us to send electronically. So I still think it's early days there. About a third of the U.S. colleges are set up with us to receive electronically. Again, we're very proud of that, but it suggests that, again, 70% are not. And then if you look on the colleges sending registrars adopting electronic transcripts, that's probably the least developed. We have about 300. Maybe there are about 600 to 800 of the 4,000 or 4,500 in total doing something. So we are still in early days. If there are 80 million transcripts sent in a year, we estimate about 10 million of them are sent electronically.
Though from your answer, or let's say the first part of your answer, I received that you see the importance of credentials much wider than only limited to, the academic, or more precisely college or maybe university space, or at a particular point in high school when you apply for college and then therefore have to send your credentials, but you see it more in the course of a lifetime of learning, and then probably to also merge these more informal credentials with your formal credentials to give either employers or maybe university a more full picture of a person?
I think that's true. I guess I would caveat that we want to be the enabling technology. So, for example, we don't store transcripts. We don't look inside the content of transcripts. We're not trying to build a big database of transcripts. And obviously that's something that many universities and schools are sensitive about. We want to be the conduit by which transcripts can move electronically as data to enable those kinds of applications. But it's really going to be the individual learner who puts all of their different credentials in one place and then takes advantage of tools, or it's going to be up to the receiver, an employer or a university, through us to collect those transcripts and again use that with great tools towards the ends that you described. So we want to be that enabling data pipe as opposed to building all of those applications ourselves, per se. But I think that's right. I think credentials represent what we know and how well we know it, and those are pretty important sets of data when you're going through transitions like getting into college or getting your first job or going to graduate school. So we want to just make that data more useful for everybody involved, all of the stakeholders, senders, receivers, and learners.
You already spoke about the, we can say big untapped potential even within the United States, as you said, penetrating some markets to a degree of 25 or 30%, which is, as you said, great already, but bears, a lot of work and opportunity to come. Yeah. On the other hand, you also mentioned MOOCs, which are, of course, I think in the academic space, of course, we had the first, really professor-led MOOCs in maybe 2010 or 2011. Now, of course, much more talking about the, I would say, startup MOOCs that have really emerged in 2012. And, of course, they all attract a large international audience. So, and the systems are, on the one hand, so different. On the other hand, yes, we are talking increasingly about the internationalization of higher education. And how do you imagine that work when it's already challenging within the US, but to maybe extend this in establishing a worldwide system or network?
Yeah, so there's a few ways to go with that because it's such a fascinating topic. I think in terms of what MOOCs represent for us very specifically, I think they are a great example of the quote-unquote problem that we are motivated to solve. And by that I mean the fragmentation of where we learn. So we're learning in high school, we're learning in college, we're attending multiple colleges, we're going on to graduate schools, but then we're also taking courses online with providers like, Udacity or edX or Coursera or Creative Live or whatever the example may be. We're developing reputation scores in Stack Overflow, whatever the example may be. And so if those continue to get fragmented, then the days when where you learned was sufficient for storing your data, so you'd go back to your high school or college or to one of those providers and say, okay, now give me your transcript, those days are over because there's so much fragmentation there that it would be just ridiculous to think that it's time for me to get a job. I'm going to go to 10 or 15 different places where I've learned in order to collect my transcripts and certificates. So I think they're a great example of the fluid nature and the more fragmented nature of where we learn, the kinds of credentials we earn, and therefore the need for almost a global registrar, a platform that allows me to access all of those different providers with one request, put all of those credentials in one place, and then put the data to work. So we're excited by it. We think it's wonderful.
Then there's also, you're focusing on credentials. On the other hand, other ideas sort of have emerged if we think more in the badges or precisely Mozilla Open Badges project. Do you think you are working on the same idea, just maybe different aspects of it? Do you think it might all come together at one point, or will we still have sort of parallel ways that these services or ideas are going to develop?
I think both can be true. I think it's certainly going to be the case that standards will enable different types of certificates, badges, and credentials to be requested, stored, managed, combined, analyzed in ways that kind of break down those different stovepipes or categories that you described. That said, there's a very different premise to a university registrar managing diplomas, certificates, and transcripts, and the kind of responsibility and the type of document that is, than EverFi offering a badge for one of their courses. Both are very important. It's not a value judgment, but they're very different. They mean something different. They get used to a certain extent differently. So I think we're going to continue to have a diversity of credentials, the importance of security, the importance of data validity, are going to vary across the different kinds of credentials and what they purport to represent. But we're going to be able, through standards, to enable people to combine and reuse them in some really cool ways. It just takes time. I mean, look at MOOCs. So people talk about MOOCs as an overnight success. The only problem is they're about an 11 to 15-year overnight success. So Art Levine wrote in 1998 about the notion of star faculty who would sign contracts with creative artists because their brand and celebrity are going to allow them online to reach global audiences. And Carol Twigg, did the earliest work about how do we redesign courses so that we can save money, use classroom time more effectively. So a lot of the innovations that are being viewed as overnight successes today, you could easily track them back to predictions and work that was done in 1996, 97, and 98. We just see them now, so we imagine they were sort of born of immaculate conception today, but rarely does that happen in education. It always takes time.
Absolutely. Just the factors from both the technology, of course, also maybe the funding opportunities, and the right constellation of people just came together and sort of contributed to this rapid growth with contribution of the tech press, I think, and being situated in Silicon Valley, sort of the darling of some of the blogs, has certainly not hindered the MOOCs to become quite popular. So with credentials, I think you said at various points during our talk that we are, still very early on, but it's definitely the right time for faculty to think about the importance of credentials, of data, and how to make good use and meaningful use of these. Time-wise, when do you think your vision with where do you want to bring Parchment is becoming more of a reality?
Oh, that's a very difficult question, especially when we talked about how difficult it is to sort of predict the timescale of change. We use this really kind of odd analogy sometimes for what we're trying to accomplish, and it's OpenTable. You may be familiar with the restaurant reservation site. And so the reason why we use OpenTable as an analogy is that OpenTable does something that we don't appreciate about it, but that's very difficult, which is they got rid of the paper-based maitre d' book. They got lots and lots of restaurants to move away from the paper-based maitre d' book and adopt a reservation system that's electronic. The reason why that's powerful is not simply the operational efficiency that brings to the restaurant, but it now enables that restaurant to be part of a network, to go to one site, to see when tables are available, to reserve them, and to tap a really powerful marketing channel in OpenTable. And that's what we think of when we think of the company. So if you asked me, kind of for us, the time scale, step one is, do we have the network? Do we have most high schools and most colleges, whether on our system or on a competitor system that's accessible through open standards, do we have them in a position where they can take an electronic request and fulfill back electronically? If we can do that across 25,000 high schools and across, arguably 4,500 to 5,000 post-secondary institutions of any scale in the U.S., then I think what we've done is created a pretty awesome platform upon which all sorts of really interesting ideas can develop to serve the learner, to serve the sender, to serve the receiver. And if you ask me, when is that going to happen? When is the majority of schools and universities going to do electronic for transcripts and degrees and enrollment verifications? I would guess we get there in about 10 to 15 years.
Mm-hmm. And you see yourself, are you currently, or do you believe that you're working on your biggest idea? As some might say, well, Blackboard was an incredibly big idea already at the time, but you said at a certain point, we found a big success. Blackboard went public in 2004, and well, let's not go through all the points of evolution, but it being a big idea, whether some people say a big business or whatsoever, but you said, no, I want to focus on the research side, becoming a professor, and then, however, being attracted by entrepreneurship again. So do you think Parchment is your biggest idea in life?
I think marrying my wife was my biggest idea. I would say, I'm not a big believer in big ideas. I believe in big trends. So, mm-hmm. I mean, the trend of the internet in education was a very big trend. I think one of the problems that education entrepreneurs run into is they feel this huge pressure because they are mission-oriented to have these big ideas. Usually if you build against the big idea, you fail. So there's a big trend in Blackboard, the movement of education online. We actually had a small idea. Someone ought to make it really easy for teachers to create a class website. And then if we did that small idea right, it would open up 20 more ideas, which would open up, 20 more ideas until Blackboard is what it is today. So Parchment is certainly a bigger trend, I think, than Blackboard. Absolutely. Absolutely. We are limited by what can you do with data about what people know and how well they know it in a knowledge economy. And that's just an incredibly exciting palette to build on. And sort of the purpose of education for many is to credential. And yet no one's really spent time innovating how credentials work, make it easier to share them, analyze them, promote them. And so I think we're absolutely involved in a much bigger trend. But our idea is small. How do you enable someone to order their credential, store it in a credential account, and do things with them? Mm-hmm. If we do that, then I think there's really cool stuff we can do on top of that.
Yeah, I was asking because I actually read that you recommended to young entrepreneurs actually not having the big ideas, but refining their idea where they can or where they can say that we serve a very particular problem, we have the market, and right. Then of course it opens them other options of raising money and so on and so forth. But you would say that you can definitely see yourself continue doing Parchment for the next 10 years, as in our previous answer, or in the previous answer you said, we are still achieving sort of phase 1, and in 10 to 15 years we might be where I would like to see Parchment.
I think that's right, and I think Parchment is much more naturally, what's the right word? It's much more naturally the convergence of my different interests. So when you study sociology of education as an academic, you spend a lot of time understanding credentials. How do credentials work? What are the roles of schools in credentialing? Whether it's the work of Randall Collins in the Credential Society or David Laborie in How to Succeed in School Without Really Learning. There's a whole set of macro sociology of education that comes down to what is the role of credentials? Is it really to measure skills in training? Or is it a status marker, like a currency that's only valuable because it's rare, which means that as soon as more people get one type of credential, then the bar is just going to move up and move up and move up until you have to have a PhD to be a janitor? Or are they signals, ways of kind of understanding what someone may know and how well they may know it, even if it's not really a measurement per se. Anyway, so it's about data, it's about the role of credentials, and it's about solving a problem. All of those are just wonderful to be involved in. So I hope to be a Parchment for a very, very long time.
That's great. I think that was sort of also the perfect maybe closing statement. And we should of course say everybody interested in learning more about Parchment should go on the website parchment.com. And well, you're active on social media, so if some of our audience are on Twitter, they can follow @Parchment, so the branding is very clear. But any other sort of outlets you would like our viewers direct to, Matthew?
No, I think our website and our Twitter account are perfect. Thank you.
So thank you so much for taking the time and taking us on a journey through the exciting new perspectives and possibilities credentials bear, and it was definitely fun and exciting to talk with you today.
I enjoyed the conversation again. Thank you so much for inviting me.